Sit up straight and tall. So I want to do a little bit of things with the spine as a mind-body sensation. How do you, right? So start to feel inward, and there is remember your breath, right? And your voice. Don't forget a couple of things. Your speech and your voice comes out of your mouth. And your mouth is positioned directly at the top of your spine. That's the C1 right there, right? So one of the things that we explore in Body, Mind, Story too is what's the, and Kevin and I are trying to figure out in ways to make it practical for storytellers, what's the role that the body plays in the telling of a story or in speech, right? So like this connection, and don't forget that speech is an incredible innovation of breath control. We're able to take our physical structures and create different tones and different cadences on our out breath in order to speak, right? So we tend to think about it in terms of breath, but if it's also the top of your spine, what are the conditions that need to be met in order for to get your spine to optimally participate in finding your voice? Now, there's going to be two basic things that I think a spine needs, and this is insights from asana, right? Is a sense of grounding, which has conditions of safety and all these things from within your own body, and a sense of direction, right? So when someone can speak and fill the whole room, right? When you know what you need to say, but you think your sense of direction has to come solely by how well you say your words, you're already losing. Your sense of direction is deeper than that, right? And think about Sammy, she doesn't get to gesticulate and have the body be part of the cadence of her words like I'm doing right now. So her sense of direction, she's such a great example because her sense of direction needs to come at a deeper level than most of us are engaging our spine and changing gravity. So sit up straight and tall. This simple idea of being able to move in multiple directions is incredibly important for speech. Because if you just try to go up, everyone if you can, take one arm up. And if you try to reach for the sky by physically reaching for the sky, right? Just like try to actually get higher, like you're going to not make it to the sky, right? Take your arm down. So we're gonna go with the other arm. In order to project from the inner body to the outer world, if I'm gonna reach for the sky, I need to go down through my sitting bones. I need to go down to become transcendent. The hope of stories rather than anecdotes, and then take your arm down. The hope of stories rather than anecdotes is stories are transcendent, right? If I just tell you about my particular anecdote of what I went through, that's only gonna have so much mileage. What it's gonna generate is sympathy or empathy for me in particular. If I can find ways to move my words and my energy outward from inside to out, the truth will be recognized by a listener, right? So again, now sit up straight and tall. So this idea of preparing the emptiness. So when I'm been, like, let's say, slighted by the maitre d', right? And I feel like I never would waste my energy this way, but let's pretend I would. Right? And I feel I have to say something. Don't you think it's going to make a lot of sense for me to exhale before I say something? That maybe I should pause before I crash into that dynamic? Not just because I want to be nicer, but because I don't want the beginning of my movement to start from my mouth outwards. Right? Like if the weight of what I'm saying is just going to be from here out, my nervous system's going to get fired up, right? So the idea of like this idea of like taking an exhale or pausing before you react. So just like let yourself land for a second. Get better at your mind falling into your own body, right? Regardless of whether your body is doing what you want or fully functional, it is still the reservoir of grounding for anything that goes from inside to out. It's the beginning boundary. What I find is when I land more into my body, my words get better. Don't forget, Patanjali also wrote a book on grammar and speech. It was never recovered. So he's writing one about more about the spine and unity and one about speech and breath control, right? It's a really important juxtaposition. So creating ease in your body, but let's use the top of the spine, the location of speech and voice, to create conditions of emptiness. So soften your organs of perception, right? So relax the skin on the face or on the temples, the jaw, the inside of the mouth. Even get before your words and soften the base of your tongue to relax your inner ear. Resist the urge to speak for a second. Let there be an emptying before the projection. It's going to be easier to empty on exhalation. Exhalation is also where sound comes from, right? So you're using the emptying as part of the excitation back to a release again with the words, right? So again, soften your organs up and get empty. And then usually when I'm dealing with the absurdity of some of my cultural interactions with people, at this point when I empty, I see the ridiculousness of of the situation I'm in. Right? They're like, no matter what I say, it's probably not going to be perfect. Right? And I'm dealing with unreality on the outside. So after this next inhalation, notice the spark of inhalation. So you empty all the way out and there's this quiet, and then there's this transition of the emptying and then the spark of inhalation, which then is also going to go out again in out breath into words, right? So you've got this process. It's much more internal. It, at a certain level, what you say does matter, but how you are as you say it is how you don't get exhausted, right? Because if you, right, is that you've got to be grounded enough. Otherwise, you're going to carry that encounter with the maitre d' with you all day and all night and wish you had said it differently, right? So this idea of being able to move in multiple directions. So now as you feel your base and you've emptied a little bit, hit down with your sitting bones and lift up through your chest. So here you've got the beginning of movement, right? At first you inhale and then exhale and lengthen. So now, so you're inhaling and going in every direction, and then you're exhaling into an extension, into something more particular. So I've got all these things to the maitre d' that I want to say. And the words I'm going to say is going to be a narrowing, right? But I want to keep that, and the maitre d' may or may not be able to hear what I'm going to say. So I want to make sure not to have my success be based on what he receives and hears, but rather on what I project. That's why, Elizabeth, your story was actually so successful, right? Is because of how you were as you told it, right? All right, so again, this down to go up, which is creating movement. So now you're bringing movement. So try to lean forward a little bit, which I know, like for Michael, trying to shift his gravity forward is not so easy. So try to lean forward and lift your chest and hit down through your sitting bones and your feet. And then sit back and know that energy is going from inside of you to outside when you speak, not completely unlike coming forward and lifting your chest. It's just more dispersed. Okay? It's coming out. It's not as tangible once it leaves your mouth. It is energy carried in sound. Meaning is carried in sound, right? And so what can I do to create the conditions of support to allow the initial propelling of my voice to go into what is going to be less tangible? Well, I'm going to need grounding. All right. And if I'm thinking that the top of my spine is more integral, my spine is more connected to my breath, I want to create a sense of grounding. Right. So like just everyone that can push in I'm taking my thumbs and I'm pushing in on my hip bones. Right. And I'm trying to feel, oh, see now, whether it's putting my legs in together like this, right? I'm trying to create a container around the base of my spine. Okay. So I want whatever it is for you, right, to do something that feels good at the base of your spine. Because I want you to notice something, then release. I want you to notice something. When you start your next inhalation, notice that there's a very slight abdominal grip at the very low abdomen when you start your inhalation. If you don't have that, like Sammy doesn't have that, she has to start the breath from way farther up. That's why her neck muscles are really strong, right? But it's fatiguing. So I want you to notice that there's a slight grip at the beginning of your inhalation. And then an extension on your exhalation, right? And so because there's this grip that you may or may not have been aware of, I want you to set the conditions of safety for that grip by pushing in on your own femur bones or hips and noticing the relief that comes from boundary. Because one of the things about your words, once they're out of your mouth, they don't have boundary anymore. The boundary is how they're received, right? And so I want to start my speech and my voice from a sense of boundary, where boundary is experienced as relief and not just anticipation. If I'm going to have all of my interaction with the maitre d' be dependent on how it's received, my boundary is not my own. It's how it meets the world. Good, and then release. So again, we've covered two things now. The emptying, the pause, the three things, the excitation of inhalation, and before the full movement, we're talking about making sure that my boundary is my own. Right? Now, when I push in on my hips, my boundary is also the empty space I feel within my container. This is why we use props. So
Matthew Sin is asking how she does this with a curved spine. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that'll have to be taken after, right? Okay. It doesn't matter. By the way, just so you know, oh my God, is my spine curved, right? Like I've got a 40-degree scoliosis, right? So what's amazing about spinal energy is that it's not just dependent on the physical energy of your spine, especially as it meets through breath and moves through breath. So your spine, Sin, doesn't have to be straight in order to recognize the benefits of boundary and of movement and of some rhythm, right? That's the short answer, Sin. It's a good question. It's just like a big one, right? Like all questions are. Okay, so this idea of moving in multiple directions. So now start to add rhythm to it. You know, your speech has rhythm, right? And it also has different tones in it, right? So this idea of using, this is why some people naturally gesture more, is that they're getting an outer expression to the rhythm. So I tend to lean in when I'm really trying to say something I want you to hear. Even when I'm just talking in Zoom, right? I need to get it out and use my body to move it. So this idea of rhythm forward and grounding forward and then extension, right, is also part of what actually needs to be part of my voice, right? Now, that doesn't mean that I have to move every time I speak. So sit back for a second. You're on mute, so say some words into the, make sure your microphone is off so no one's listening, and try to like feel the relationship that your body has to whatever you're saying. So say whatever, sing a song if you want, row, row, row your boat, right? Whatever it is, or recite a poem, and start to very quietly and in little movements or big ones, start to have your body and your spine become congruent with your utterance, right? And so you get the sensation of it, of what that feels like. Now go behind the balance point. You're not going to be able to directly use your balance now and the change of gravities. How do you deepen the bass of your voice? I don't mean the bum, 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 bum bass. I mean the grounding of your bass in order to get the benefit of changing the airflow, right? So you've got these things, right, there's more rhythm here. This was also the boundary, right, was to create conditions of safety in your emptiness in order for you not to judge your words with your mind. So the boundary of your body creates bound conditions of safety that are different than self-judgment for your voice, right? So now, of course, I want you to create the spine to get that it's not alone, that there are ways to create direction that comes in up through my core and out through my mouth, up through my core and out through my mouth. So we've been doing the out through your mouth like this. If I come forward with a drop chest, that's not coming out my mouth as much. If I come forward with a lifted chest, don't you want to stick your tongue out? So just so you know that there are whole poses of using your face and mouth, right, as part of the pose. Why? Because it starts to get the top of your spine wants to get synchronized with the movement, right? So try that a couple times. You're moving, you're opening your mouth, right? Can't you feel kind of the roar of it, right? Right? Have your body be part of your roar, not just the quantity of your air, right? Not just the amount of your air, because some of us have less air to actually push forward into the world. So when I wrote this to Kevin Kling, he wrote back, he says, why do you think a baby's cry can fill the Metrodome? Why is it one baby's cry on an airplane can actually drive everyone insane? We know how to fill the room. We just forget as adults, right? That we know how to hit that completeness, right? So now to help this movement again, I want you to put your hand on your knees if you can, or if you need to just ground and lift your chest. But I want you to push back, get input this way, right? And lift your chest and come forward. So you start to synchronize the direction of the airflow. Have you noticed, well, and I haven't been able to do this in 42 years, but when people are being inspirational speakers, I usually don't do it from the seated position. Think about that. They stand up and they move around. So you'll see me pace in my wheelchair a lot when I'm speaking, right? Because I want every part of me in the direction. So I'm hitting back, I'm grounding, I'm lifting, and I'm coming forward, right? And I want to keep feeling that. How to include, and when I come forward, now push down on your knees and feel where your feet are. Ground your feet, come up through your sitting bones, lift your chest, and feel this movement of energy, right? It's not like watching someone stand up, right? And the question is, how do I include my whole body back here? Do I imagine it? Or do I make sure that all of me is coming into my voice? Right now, the trick is, how do you include the empty spaces of who and what you are into your speech without becoming too vulnerable? Well, through boundary. So as you're doing this and getting more active, right? Make sure your lips are together, teeth slightly apart. Keep the eyes sinking into the back of the head, keep the quiet, and move with it. Now, just get bigger. Take your arms wide. But take your arms wide from the center outward. Right? Now, hit down through your sitting bones, ground your feet, and take your arms wide. Become the direction of your sound without sound. Right? And then back together. And right away, some of us go off balance, right? So if it helps you to take only one arm up, so I could do it this way, I'm compressing my spine right there when I do both arms. When I really want to do it, I'm going to ground with this hand and go with this hand as a way to feel my out breath, right? Feel, I'm doing the F, right? There's a good one, right? Feel my out breath in coordination with movement. Switch arms. Feel my out breath in coordination of movement. Feel my out breath in coordination with movement. Right? And then release it. Now I'm going to ground it again. Because I can tell you, after I've spoken a lot, and I remember learning this from Gina Engar when she said she was supporting her legs in a convention in simple cross legs, and she said, don't you know that when you speak a lot, your legs get tired? That was mind-blowing for me. So this grounding of my legs is essential for the projection of my voice, right? I want to get this outward into the world without my judgment. See, the body can project without judgment. The mind judges everything, right? Getting that connection. And then sit and be quiet and feel the calming sensation and connect the calming sensation and let the inhalation ignite it. Let the exhalation return to it. So one of the places in Body, Mind, Story, but also in a lot of things that we do, to help the voice is, first of all, helping a person see ease, feel ease. When I'm all of a sudden, if my communication is coming out of an affront, the maitre d' talking not to me, even though I made the reservation, I am not coming from a sense of relief. I am coming from a slight that's going to put me out of my body and out of my base. Okay, and that's going to make me lose energy faster. Right? So this idea of the pause and the feeling of the container, right? And when we want to get, you got to be careful with how much you use your body, because that's also an expression of violence, right? If you come into someone's space too fast, right? But then there's also, so if I find that pause and I ground it, and I make sure I know how to fill my vessel from inside to out. So helping someone find their voice is one of the conditions, is to help them find a sensation of relief, but a sensation of relief in their body. Okay. And then supporting between the shoulder blades, supporting the seat of consciousness. So in Body, Mind, Story, we'll be doing a lot of different things trying to get this part of the person supported, either lying over a bolster, going out. So we're preparing all this movement of energy. So by the time they're telling the story, it's as much about the energy coming out of them as the truth of their words or the explaining of their words, Elizabeth, right? Like that's how it came out. Your story to me was incredibly authentic because it came from inside to out, right? And so that's part of the process. And it's amazing. It sounds so barfy, but supporting the spine, especially behind the heart, actually creates the conditions of expression. Because then when you make the connection between your life force at the base of your spine and the top of your spine, the outward expression of breath, when you make sure that the weakest point, the greatest point from each side, between those 2 points, the part of your spine at your chest, right? So it gets supported in the middle, it actually comes out better. Right. So I hope that's some insight. We didn't, because this group is so good at communicating and talking. The practice wasn't long. I hope that was helpful.